for the South Shore Clean Cities Promoting Sustainability webinar series. Today we have Ms. Kathy Luther with NERC, who will start us off and then lead into Chad's presentation. So Kathy, whenever you're ready for the Solar Ready Northwest Indiana webinar.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephanie. My name is Kathy Luther. I'm the Director of Environmental Programs for the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission. We have a new project that we are kicking off this year, Solar Ready Northwest Indiana. So this webinar is to introduce people to the project and also to give a little background on the solar and what rooftop solar and all the opportunities and available to us. So I'm going first. I'm going to give an overview of our project here, and then Chad Laurent of Meister Consultants will provide more details about all the solar ready opportunities we can learn about through our project. So Solar Ready 2 is part of the U.S. Department of Energy Sunshot Initiative Rooftop Solar Challenge. This is a program from the DOE that is really trying to drive down the cost of solar around the country through a lot of collaborative efforts. The Rooftop Solar Challenge incentivizes regional teams to make it easier and more affordable to go solar by streamlining permit processes, updating planning and zoning codes, improving standards, and increasing access to financing. The teams will clear paths for rapid expansion of solar energy. So NERC has partnered with the Mid-America Regional Council, which is a organization very similar to NERC in the Kansas City area, with the National Association of Regional Councils, and with Meister Consultants Group and the Council of State Governments on this project. The goals of the project are to encourage communities in our region and all of these regions that are participating to implement best solar management practices, provide training and methods and proven implementation strategies that other parts of the country have already been utilizing. Ultimately, we'll have a lot more streamlined and standardized solar processes for Northwest Indiana. So this is a map of all the different regions that are participating in Solar Ready 2. So we are one of 10. And although quite a few of them, you'll notice, are in what you might consider Sun Belt states, we have some other partners, OKI, which is Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, and Central New York, and Delaware Valley, which is the Philadelphia area. So in our more temperate parts of the country. And we're all sharing information, which is going to be very helpful. So as I mentioned before, the goals of the program are to reduce costs for solar through regulatory reform, like smarter zoning code and permitting processes. And that is primarily why NERC, the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, is involved. We can be a central repository of this information and funnel it out to our multiple cities and towns who all participate in NERC. We can also explore access to financing for solar if that is something of a barrier in our region. And ultimately, this, we hope, will promote more solar adoption through our region. NERC is a sub-awardee of the overall national project. We have received $90,000 to do this project, but it will be released depending on progress as we go forward. And the timeline for the project is 18 to 30 months, again, depending on if we make good progress. And the national partners on the grant that I mentioned are the Mid-America Regional Council, the National Association of Regional Councils, the Meister Consultants Group, and the Council of State Governments, all of whom have a variety of different expertise to bring to the table, or will be helping us disseminate the program beyond ourselves. And here again are all the regional partners. I'm particularly excited that Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments is a part of this because it may be an opportunity to get some solar at both kind of opposite corners of the state and be the leaders. So for our project here in Northwest Indiana, we have a variety of tasks. And so we're kind of starting now very at the tail end of February, engaging stakeholders in the process so that we can tailor our program to our needs here. So we've invited folks to this webinar, and we will be scheduling a meeting of a stakeholder advisory group to really kick off how to go forward from here. And we are planning to have that in March. The stakeholder advisory group will evaluate the different best management practices that we have learned about, and decide which ones will best help us advance solar in Northwest Indiana. And as a result of that, then we will promote the project and try to get. I'm hopeful we could get 10 of our local government jurisdictions to participate in some form of solar best management practice. 30 would be very, very comprehensive. That would be a very stretchy goal, but that will be our top of the line goal there. We will also be able to provide data on the status of our market. We will understand where we are and where we need to go, and we'll be able to measure progress that we've made. And the national program, they will be gathering a lot of financial options and data, and engaging in more direct citizen panels and getting more information about the general public engagement for solar. So our next step here in Northwest Indiana will be to schedule our stakeholder advisory group meeting. Many of you on the call have been identified as a potential stakeholder or an important stakeholder group. So we hope that you will be interested in following us along on this project and helping us know from your experience with solar. Ideally, the different people that we would like to have in our stakeholder group are local government building officials and planners, NIPSCO, solar industry installers, vendors, those types, local developers and builders who want to have solar-ready homes, trade groups, the folks who are interested in solar as a green jobs and training opportunity, inspectors, and also residents who are interested in solar or have been stymied by difficulty in installing solar on their home. So if you're on the webinar but haven't received an invitation to the stakeholder group, please let us know if you're interested. So this is my contact information for more questions, or if you're interested in the stakeholder group for the Solar Ready Northwest Indiana program. And I don't know, Stephanie, if we should do some questions for me or maybe go straight to Chad and then open it up for questions at the end.
Definitely, we can do the questions now, or we can just wait till the end. I don't have any questions right now. If anybody does have questions, they can type them in the question box, and then we can just answer them after Chad's presentation.
Okay, so why don't I do that? So Chad Lawrence is with the Micro Consulting Group. They're the technical support for this national project. An international consulting firm working on global best practices for this. And they have a lot of information. They've provided technical assistance to the Massachusetts Department of Energy, Delaware, California, Hawaii, New York, Massachusetts, a lot of states. So they have a lot of knowledge, and Chad is going to talk about the benefits to solar and the challenges and give us just a kind of a teaser of what kind of questions the stakeholder group will help us answer going forward.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kathy. Hopefully you all can see the screen. I'm going to run through sort of what are the benefits and barriers of adopting solar in your region, sort of why are we doing this, why are we interested in soft costs, why solar is an opportunity, and sort of run through some of the background. As Kathy mentioned, we're Meister Consultants Group. We're an international consulting firm. We have about 100 consultants worldwide. Majority of them are in Europe. Our U.S. headquarters is in Boston. We're also part of the Sunshot Solar Outreach Partnership, and we've worked with a number of communities across the country on developing solar policies, local communities as well as states, adopting and evaluating solar policies and helping procure solar. We also do a lot of other renewable energy and sustainability consulting for corporate clients and also public sector and nonprofit clients as well. The two lead contacts are myself, Chad Laurent, and also my colleague Jason Upal. We're both sort of the technical leads on the Solar Ready 2 project that Kathy mentioned, and we're here to help and provide on-call technical assistance, and hopefully we'll also be running an in-person workshop at some point in Northwest Indiana region to sort of dive into some of the specifics on one of the best management practices that Kathy alluded to. So who are the key stakeholders in this project? So one is elected officials, because they help make the ultimate decision in municipalities as to which policies can go forward. Local constituents who are there to support and advocate for different policies. Business and industry to give their perspective on what works best for them, how to create local jobs and incentives. And then also regional utilities, whether it's an investor-owned utility, which are one of the larger utilities, or maybe a municipal utility that is directly controlled by a municipal government. So in terms of solar, solar has seen tremendous growth over the last 7 or 8 years. The most recent data that we have is through 2012, but the chart would show a similar scale of increase in 2013. What was less than a $2 billion industry in 2006 is now over $14 billion. So just very impressive growth all through a time frame, in sustained growth all through a time frame in which the overall economy did not see the same sort of growth. It's also created a ton of jobs within the United States, and every year has set a new record in terms of percentage growth over the previous year from 2006 through 2013. And as I always like to say, even if the panels are being manufactured in China or equipment is being manufactured somewhere else, you can't ship your home to China to have the panels put onto it. And so most of these jobs and continue to see local job growth in the installation, electricians, installers, local financing institutions, and folks that actually do the hands-on, on-the-ground work of installing solar around the country. And also what we've seen, and this should be of no surprise, but those states that have the largest solar markets also have the largest number of solar jobs, which again just indicates that it's not, what's driving these jobs aren't just a few large projects or a few large manufacturing facilities. It's the fact that there's a sustained real demand for growth, the growth and installation of solar within your community, and that really does create jobs. One of the other main key benefits of solar energy is price stability. So once you pay for the equipment up front, the energy source or the fuel is free for the next 30 plus years. So while there is an upfront cost, there's no, you know what that cost is, and you can, amortize it or determine, what that cost to you is over those 30 years, and it won't change. This is opposed to fossil fuel prices, which this chart illustrates can be all over the place. And this is sort of an interesting chart for an energy geek like myself, because this shows that even in the era of supposed cheap natural gas from fracking, if you are at the end of the natural gas pipeline like we are here in Boston or in the Northeast, and you get a cold snap, it's been colder than the past 10 years, but hasn't been the coldest winter we've ever had in the Northeast. But all of a sudden it gets cold, people are using natural gas for heat and electricity, and you see that dramatic spike in January started in December, and then January is even higher in terms of the average wholesale price of electricity in the Boston area. So relying on fossil fuels of any type, and you will see this type of variation, whereas with solar and other renewables, you know what that price is, and the price doesn't change for the life of the system. It's also a smart investment for homes. And there's a lot of caveats to this study. This was a study that was done in a few California subdivisions, and they found that the same house, if it had solar on it, it sold 20% faster and for 17% more than homes that did not have solar on it. Now, again, this is a few specific subdivisions that were, case studies, but everyone seems to believe that it would translate to other parts of the country, that at least it would be favorable if you can advertise a home that comes with free and or discounted electricity for 20 years. And there's certainly, as more and more people become aware of solar and its benefits, it can add significant value to your home. It's also a smart investment for business. So a number of companies have invested significant amounts of solar installations on their buildings. So top companies in terms of overall size, like Walmart, Costco, Kohl's, Apple, IKEA, all have invested heavily in solar in recent years and have numerous of their buildings and or campuses that have solar because they understand that price volatility affects their business, so they can install and know the price of electricity for the next 20 or 30 years. It just makes a lot of sense to do it. It can also be a smart investment for local governments. This is a picture of a capped landfill in a community that decided to install solar and then buy the solar power at a fixed price for 20 years from that facility on the capped landfill from a developer, and savings of 10 to 15% off their electricity prices over the next 20 years. So there's, most municipalities have unused roof space or unused brownfield space, whether it's a capped landfill or an industrial site that's not used, or government property that is currently not being used to its fullest extent. There's numerous opportunities to expand and develop solar on local government property as well, and local governments can then reap those savings and cost, both in cost of electricity and also sort of knowing what your electricity is going to cost you, rather than be subject to price spikes and market volatility. It's also valuable to utilities. So locating electricity where it's being used puts a lot less wear and tear on the wires, so to speak. Also, the utilities, if customers are generating their power and the utility is fairly compensated for them, it avoids their need to go out and procure additional power. Avoided line losses, so as electricity travels along the lines, a certain amount of it is lost due to the distance that it has to travel. So the closer the generation is to its use, the better. Avoided capacity purchases. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but utilities often have to buy extra power during the peak summer demand times of day, and solar can align pretty well with when those peaks occur and help avoid some of those capacity purchases. Again, it's less wear and tear, and so the utility doesn't have to purchase or make as many investments in upgrading the equipment. And again, fossil fuel price impacts most of those peak generation, the peak sources of the electricity that the utilities have to go and procure during those peak times of day can also be the most expensive. And so if you're avoiding those, it avoids the fossil fuel impacts. And then there is potential looking forward with battery or smart grid technologies to integrate PV and have it provide backup power or resilient or emergency power. So this is an example of how installing a lot of solar can affect the price of electricity. So the chart on the top is Germany in 2008, where they had quite a bit of solar compared to the U.S., but not as much as they do in 2012. And what you see there is a chart showing the amount of electricity that's being used, and therefore the price of electricity through the day. And so there was a sort of the peak was sustained during the middle part of the day. By 2012, there was enough installed solar in Germany that it depressed or lowered the price of electricity significantly, because all of the electricity during the time that the sun was shining was essentially being generated by solar. And the record was set in May, and Germany received during those hours of the day over half of all of their electricity was coming from solar power. So it has, even at relatively small overall percentages, has a real potential to reduce the price of electricity and also provide a significant amount of electricity during the times that it's sunny. In terms of quantifying what the value, there's a lot of other values that electricity provides in terms of environmental value, air pollution value. And there are a number of studies that looked at saying, okay, we understand that solar provides additional value other than just wholesale cost of electricity at which it would sell for. Things like fuel cost savings, operational maintenance cost savings, security enhancement value of solar. If you have it's a lot harder to knock out in a power outage a number of distributed systems that are on various rooftops and different land and ground-mounted sites rather than one centralized power plant. Fuel price hedging. Anyway, you can see the list of the different values on the right, and when studies have attempted to sort of quantify these values, they find that the value is above and beyond the wholesale rate of electricity or even the retail rate of electricity. So most wholesale or retail rates are in the $90 to $150 per megawatt hour range, and this study showed that at least in parts of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, the value of solar was a good twice that amount. So this just gives a snapshot. So these are all the states that we're working in as part of Solar Ready 2. So 13 different states and Washington, D.C. There's about 2.9 gigawatts of solar installed in these states, which is about 38% of U.S. capacity, so not insignificant, and covers about 44% of the U.S. population. But then we sort of dig a little bit deeper. So which are the top markets among the Solar Ready 2 jurisdictions? So number 1, Arizona. Number 2, New Jersey, which often surprises folks. New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, Florida, and Indiana has an enormous opportunity to catch up to some of the other states that are part of the team, and I think there's a real opportunity to learn from some of the other states that have a little bit more robust solar markets. A lot of these, the reason for these are state-level policies that provide renewable energy certificates and state policies that provide rebates and incentives. So that's one of the primary drivers for the size of these markets so far. That being said, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that local governments can do to spur the market as well. So how does this compare to global installed capacity? So far and away, I've mentioned Germany a little bit, is the top country in terms of installed capacity is Germany, with over 32% of the world's installed solar capacity. And the second is Italy. The U.S. is making significant ground in recent years, as illustrated by the dramatic market growth slides that I showed earlier. But we still have quite a ways to go to catch up to Germany. And when you look at sort of installed capacity per person, so in Germany, there are about 400 watts per person installed in terms of solar. The U.S. average is 23 watts. Arizona, it's more like about 165. New Jersey is a little over 100. And in Indiana, currently we're only at 0.67 watts per person. So I'm not, showing this to say that, shame on Indiana. It's more there's a tremendous opportunity here because solar works in any part of the country. So it's typically thought that, well, you need to be in Arizona or maybe New Mexico or some of those red parts of this chart to have solar make a real difference. But when you compare this picture to Germany, you quickly realize that Germany is getting at times of day half of their electricity from solar, and the only place that has similar solar resources is Alaska and maybe parts of Washington. So anywhere in the United States can beat Germany pretty much hands down in terms of the amount of solar that you're going to get out of an individual installed system. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that solar panels actually work most efficiently in sunny, cool temperatures. So as they get too hot, or as they get, the hotter they get, they tend to be a little less efficient. So you do get gains from being in Arizona or some sunnier locations, but you do see a little bit of efficiency loss due to the excess heat. And so you can make up some of that in other parts of the country where it's a bit cooler. And it's also interesting that, Boston, comparing Boston and Florida, in Boston, a solar PV system would produce about 90% of what a system would produce in Florida, which isn't a significant enough difference to affect the decision of whether or not to put solar. So that's all just to say that solar definitely works in Indiana. It's not a question of it's not sunny enough or it's too cold or too snowy. So as part of the Solar Outreach Partnership, we've done regional workshops in a number of states and cities across the country, and so we asked the question, like, what is the greatest barrier to solar adoption in your community? And the far and away the number one reason is the perceived high upfront cost or low return on investment of solar, meaning it's too expensive. But right on the heels is lack of information. So a lot of times the last time folks looked at solar, it was a number of years ago when it was more expensive, or again, they are under the misconception that it's not sunny enough, it only works in Florida and Arizona. And then there are other unfriendly policy environment or lack of incentives. Local zoning and permitting comes up quite a bit of time, and again, that's something that local governments have a big role in helping remove some of these barriers. No, I mentioned if you had looked at solar a few years ago, it may have been out of reach, but in terms of the awareness and education, we've seen a 36% drop in price of solar just over the last 3 years. So even if you looked at solar 3 years ago and it wasn't necessarily a good economic opportunity, it may be now, because we've seen prices come down so significantly. And if you extend this chart back to 1978, you'll see a 99% drop in price between 1978 and 2013. So solar has really made leaps and bounds in terms of coming down in cost. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of those cost savings. That being said, in many parts of the country, the cost of solar is still in what we would call stage one. So it may still be higher than the retail price of electricity. And the goal is to bring the cost of solar down where it's in stage two, where the cost of solar is less than retail, and eventually stage three, where the price becomes at or below wholesale prices. And currently in Germany, solar can be better than the wholesale price of electricity, and there are a handful of markets that are already better than the retail price. A couple of states in the Northeast, parts of California and Hawaii, and or coming really close to meeting the retail price. And as you come closer to meeting the retail or wholesale price, that's what's referred to as grid parity. So we're approaching grid parity. That being said, solar in many markets is still a little bit more expensive. But it's important to keep in mind that the reason it's more expensive is that it is competing against established fossil fuel generation, which is, quote unquote, cheaper. But as you can see, the amount of subsidies that go to natural gas, coal, and nuclear power dwarf the amount of money that has gone to solar power. And the most critical component there is that the natural gas, coal, and nuclear subsidies have been around for at least 40 years. Natural gas and coal looking at some over 100 years of uninterrupted subsidies, whereas solar, there was a few subsidies in the 70s, and then not again until the mid-2000s. Then they expired and then came on board again towards the end of the 2000s. and they're set to expire in 2016. There are no expiration dates on any of the natural gas, coal, or nuclear subsidies for electricity. So, it's just important to remember that all of our energy is highly subsidized at the federal level. It's just a question of how much and for how long. So when you're saying the solar is more expensive, there is an underlying reason in terms of what it's being compared to. So if we look a little bit more in detail at sort of what the cost of solar is in the U.S. versus what it costs in Germany, you'll see that it's about half the price in Germany for installed cost of solar. Now, the panels and equipment is all made in the same place, whether it's there are U.S. manufacturers of solar equipment. There's a number of top inverter companies in the United States, as well as panel manufacturers. There's panel manufacturers and inverter manufacturers in Germany. So what this shows is the hardware costs are about the same. In fact, they might be a little bit higher in Germany even. So the rest is all this non-hardware cost. That's really the component that is affecting the price of solar in the U.S. and making it twice as much as our friends over in Germany. So let's take a look at what that is made up of. The first half of that is this sort of broad profits, taxes, and overhead. And a lot of that is driven by market size. So when a company is doing a high volume sales, they're able to become a little bit more efficient. They need to charge less overhead. The terms of taxes and other profit margin needs to be higher when the market is smaller in order to make the business viable. However, this other piece also drives some of the profit margin requirements, and these are what are referred to as soft costs. So as Kathy was mentioning, is permitting and inspection, zoning, financing costs, paperwork, customer acquisition is a big piece, and installation labor. I just want to touch a bit on customer acquisition. So it can often take a year for a person to start to think about putting solar on their roof until they actually get the system installed and sign the contract, and that is very expensive for installers to have to follow up with customers and sort of wait on their decision-making process for that period of time. Whereas if more and more of your neighbors had solar and you were more comfortable with that decision, you'd likely make that decision faster. And therefore, in Germany, we see the market has an effect in terms of reducing some of these soft costs, but most of these soft costs are local government processes that are just much more expensive than they are in Germany. And that translates into time. So before the Solar America Cities program in New York, it took a year to get a solar project built in New York City, with all the paperwork and timing and coordinating with the energy utility. And that was from the time that the customer said, I'm signing the contract. It then took a year before that system was actually working. The Solar America Cities program got it down to 100 days, so just a little over 3 months, which was a huge step in the right direction and sort of a big win for New York City. But when you compare that excuse me, to the process in Germany, where you can get solar installed from the time you call the installer till it's up and working and connected to the utility and producing electricity, can be in a little over a week. And in some examples, the installer showed up in the morning, called the utility at 10 a.m. The utility did the interconnect by the afternoon, and the system was all running essentially within 1 day. So most of that 7 days was waiting for the customer to sign the agreement and just timing in terms of scheduling the appointment to do the install. It's just really pretty impressive, but you can see where that 100 days translates into a lot of overhead and costs. So the time to installation, it takes about 7.2 more man-hours in the U.S. than it does in Germany to permit a system. So getting the necessary building and inspections from local governments 7 times more. The cost of permitting is 21 times what that cost is in Germany. So the average cost of permits is about 20 cents per watt versus around 1 cent in Germany. And so one of the keys to their success is consistency and transparency and standardization through the whole process of making the decision to put solar on your roof. And so again, while the global price of the panels and that is not something that a local government has control over, nor the state incentive levels, there's this other large piece of soft costs that you have a direct opportunity to reduce those costs, to streamline processes, and make your community more solar friendly. And what we're seeing is that the hardware costs are coming down significantly. So panels are becoming more efficient, and are being scaled up. There's more supply, and those prices are coming down, and that's leading to the overall 30% drop in price between 2010 and 2013. However, soft costs were still lagging a little bit behind, and we sort of have seen on a national average level them go unchanged between 2010 and 2012, and not near the 2020 Sunshot DOE goals of less than $1.50 a watt total installed price. We've got a long way to go. So as Kathy mentioned, our goal is to help enable you local governments to replicate successful solar practices both internationally and nationally, to reduce those soft costs and therefore expand the adoption of solar energy in your community. And the sort of roadmap, if you will, that we put together, and these are what we call the best management practices, and generally categorized as planning improvements, process improvements, and financing and solar adoption policies. And so under planning, there's a number of zoning code improvements that could be made, solar access ordinance and solar rights ordinances that can be in place, and then code improvements either have checklists for new construction or requirements for new construction to make homes solar ready, which can help reduce the cost of installations. Under process, so permitting process improvements, the process itself may be good and may be fairly streamlined, but it may not be easily accessible or known to an installer. So even within a state, an installer may have 100 different jurisdictions that have a different process, and it can take a lot of time and effort to determine what that process is in each of those different jurisdictions. So it could be as simple as providing a simple checklist on your municipal website, making sure all the forms and applications are available online, and or over the counter. The next is looking at permit fees. So many times communities are just not familiar with permitting solar and don't know what those fees should be, and unintentionally have a fee that is too large or large enough to really affect project economics. And then step 3 under process may be to pre-qualify certain installers for a streamlined or expedited permit process. There's also 85% of residential rooftop solar systems, no matter where they're installed in the United States, are generally the same in terms of their basic engineering and structural design. So there's ways to say, like, look, if you're installing one of these standard systems, there's maybe no need for a double or triple checking of the work, as long as a certified and stamped the documents and plans are stamped by an engineer, or if you're a certified installer who has demonstrated experience, and if they're bringing a project, maybe it can go through a more streamlined process. And then finally, in terms of financing, it may be worth surveying local installers to get their sense of where the improvements might be. There's also a sort of underutilized opportunity to work with local lending institutions, whether it's local banks or local co-ops, to provide loans for solar for homeowners, either built into home equity loans. There's also a couple of federal loan products that now allow solar to be eligible as part of those sort of federally backed loans, and local banks or co-ops can participate in those, which again maybe make solar a little bit cheaper, or at least lower upfront cost, but also is an opportunity to keep the financing of those projects within the local bank and therefore within the local community. And then finally, there's opportunities to do what are called solarized programs, and that's where communities look at going out and putting out a request for proposals to an installer, and that installer develops a program where the more people that sign up and agree to purchase a system, the lower the price becomes. And so there's different tiered pricing. So if you get 50 customers, it's one price. 100, it's another price. And in some instances, we can see significant decreases in cost that the installer can offer, mostly through reductions of customer acquisition costs by enacting solarized programs. And then it creates a whole lot of local buzz, an interest in solar that we've seen lasts far beyond when that Solarize program is enacted. So that's sort of a broad overview of why solar is a good thing to be thinking about, and a brief overview of some of the best practices that we are excited to help the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission put together and explore. And so I think the next step is for the stakeholder group to sort of determine where the priorities are, and then we can help dig into the details of how some of these policies might be implemented in the region. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Stephanie and Kathy, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
If anybody has any questions, they can type them in the question box. I don't see any as of right now. This webinar is being recorded, though, so you guys, if you think of any questions, if you go through the slides again, we will send out Kathy and Chad's email information and phone number so that you might reach out to them or Kathy with any questions post-webinar. Well, if there's no questions right now, then thank you for joining us today for the Solar Ready Northwest Indiana and webinar. And if you guys just have a good day, and we'll send out the webinar recording after the webinar. And if anybody wants to be part of the regional stakeholder process moving forward, please contact Kathy. Oh, I did have one question come in real quick, Chad and Kathy. The one person wants to know, will there be any grants to residents?
Not as part of the Solar Ready 2 program. There aren't DOE grants that would directly buy down the cost of solar. But you could advocate for the state or local utility or other agencies to provide those types of incentives for residents as part of the work we're doing. That could be one policy that is promoted, is to reach out to those stakeholders to try and get some sort of incentive put in place.
Great question, Pete. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks.